Prairie View, Kansas, was one of those small towns where everyone knew each other, and news spread faster than the internet. 15,000 residents lived a quiet life among endless wheat fields, where the biggest event of the year was the Harvest Festival in September. Here, children grew up playing in the same yards where their parents had played, and families passed down traditions from generation to generation. Detective Terrence Harris sat in his office in the Sheriff's Department building, looking out the window at Main Street. At 42, he was one of the most respected officers in town. 20 years of service, an impeccable reputation, a loving family. On the outside, his life seemed perfect. But inside, Terrence felt something slowly tearing him apart. "Terrence, we have a new guy!" Sheriff Robert Stone's voice interrupted his thoughts. Stone was an old-school man, conservative and principled, but fair. He had been in charge of the department for 25 years and enjoyed unquestionable authority. Officer David Cole, transferred from Topeka. Good references, clean record. I want you to take him under your wing. Terrence nodded, trying to look interested. New faces rarely appeared in the department, and when they did, they were usually local boys who had grown up there. Outsiders aroused curiosity. David Cole turned out to be a tall, young man of 28 with attentive eyes and a confident gait. When he shook Terrence's hand, the detective felt a strange excitement that he tried to suppress immediately. "Nice to meet you, Detective Harris. I've heard a lot of good things about your work," David said, and his voice sounded sincere. "Welcome to Prairie View. It's not like the big city here, but it has its own peculiarities," Terrence replied, trying to remain professional. The next few days were spent with David, getting to know the ins and outs of working in a small town. Terrence showed him around the district, explained local traditions and unspoken rules. David proved to be a quick learner and an attentive listener. But what struck Terrence most was how easy it was to talk to him. "Why did you move here?" Terrence asked one evening as they finished their patrol. David paused for a moment, looking at the setting sun over the fields. "I was tired of the big city. I wanted something real, where people still know each other by name." Terrence understood. He sometimes wondered what it was like to live in a big city where you could get lost in the crowd, where no one knew your secrets. But he quickly dismissed those thoughts. He had a family, responsibilities, a reputation. At home, Terrence was greeted by his usual routine. His wife, Rose, worked as a nurse at the local hospital and always came home tired. At 39, she had retained her beauty, but in recent years a certain distance had grown between them, which they both tried not to notice. "How's your new partner?" she asked as she set the table. "He's a good cop. He learns fast," Terrence replied, helping their 12-year-old son Jacob with his homework. Rose nodded, but Terrence noticed how she looked at him intently. She had always been perceptive, and that sometimes bothered him. 8-year-old Emily climbed onto her father's lap with a book. "Daddy, read to me!" Terrence smiled as he hugged his daughter. These moments with his family were his anchor, a reminder of what was important in life. But even here, surrounded by his family, he felt like an actor playing a role. The next day, an incident at the department changed everything. A call came in about domestic violence on the outskirts of town. Terrence and David were the first to arrive. Jim McGregor, a local mechanic known for his temper and drinking, had beaten his wife. When the police arrived, he was still in a rage. "Get out of my house!" he shouted, threatening them with a bottle. Terrence tried to calm him down with words, but McGregor was too drunk to listen. The situation was heating up. McGregor's wife sat in the corner with a bruised face, their children crying in the next room. David acted decisively, but without excessive aggression. He managed to disarm McGregor and handcuff him without causing serious injury. Terrence was impressed by the young officer's professionalism. "Good work," he said as they returned to the station. "Thanks. I hate calls like that, especially when children are involved," David replied, his voice sounding genuinely pained. Terrence looked at him with new respect. There was something special about this man, a combination of strength and sensitivity that was rare in their profession. That evening, they stayed late at the office filling out reports. The other employees had already gone home and the building was quiet. "Detective Harris," David began, putting down his pen, "can I ask you a personal question?" Terrence tensed. Of course. Have you ever felt like you're not living your own life? The question caught Terrence off guard. He was silent for a long time, staring at David. There was something understanding in the young officer's eyes that made Terrence's heart beat faster. Sometimes, he finally replied. Why do you ask? David shrugged. It's just that in big cities, people can be who they really are. Here, he gestured around him, it's more complicated. Terrence realized that there was much more between the lines than met the eye. It both frightened and attracted him. People have roots here, he said cautiously. Families, traditions, expectations. Yes, David agreed, but sometimes those roots can become chains. Their eyes met, and a tension hung in the air that neither of them dared to name aloud. Terrence was the first to look away. I should be going, he said, gathering his papers. Of course. Good night, detective. On the way home, Terrence couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. David's words echoed in his mind, awakening feelings he had tried to suppress for years. He thought about his life, the choices he had made, the mask he wore every day. At home, he was greeted by the familiar scene. Rose was helping the children with their homework, dinner was cooking in the kitchen, and the TV was quietly murmuring the news. It was the normal family life that many people dreamed of. You look pensive, Rose remarked as they went to bed. It's been a tough day, Terrence replied, hugging his wife. But even lying next to Rose, he thought about David, about his words, about the strange understanding that had flashed between them. Terrence knew he was entering dangerous territory, but he couldn't stop himself. Over the next few days, their professional partnership grew stronger. They worked well together, complementing each other. David quickly earned the respect of his colleagues with his professionalism and humanity. Terrence, meanwhile, grew to appreciate not only his work ethic, but also his personality. One evening, when they were again staying late at the office, David brought coffee and sat down across from Terrence. Detective, thank you for helping me settle in. I know it wasn't easy. Terrence, the detective corrected him. When we're alone, you can call me Terrence. David smiled. Then I'm David. This simple change in formality meant more than it seemed. The formal barriers between them were breaking down, and Terrence felt his carefully constructed defenses beginning to crack. 3 weeks had passed since David's arrival in Prairie View. During that time, he had not only settled into his work at the department, but also found a small apartment above a bakery on Main Street. Mrs. Patterson, the bakery's owner, was delighted with her new tenant. A polite, quiet young man who always said hello and sometimes helped her with heavy boxes. Terrence increasingly found excuses to stay with David after work. Officially, they discussed business, studied local specifics, and planned patrols. But in reality, both enjoyed these moments of closeness, which were becoming increasingly intense and meaningful. Tell me about your family, David asked one evening as they sat in the empty office working on reports. Terrence froze for a moment. Rose works at the hospital. She's a good woman, a caring mother. Jacob is into baseball, and Emily likes to draw. He spoke mechanically, as if reading from a file. Sounds like the perfect family, David remarked, a hint of sadness in his voice. Do you have anyone? Terrence asked, trying to sound indifferent. David shook his head. I had a relationship in Topeka. It didn't work out. He paused. It's hard to find someone who really understands you. Their eyes met, and Terrence felt his heart skip a beat. At that moment, he realized that they weren't just talking about personal relationships, but something much deeper and more dangerous. The first physical contact happened by accident. They were sorting through old files in the archive, and David reached for a folder on the top shelf. Terrence wanted to help. Their hands touched, and they both froze. The touch lasted only a second, but an electric shock ran through Terrence's body. Sorry, David muttered, but didn't pull away. It's okay, Terrence replied, though his voice sounded hoarse. From that day on, the atmosphere between them changed. Accidental touches became more frequent. A hand on the shoulder when Terrence was explaining something. Fingers brushing against each other when passing documents. Each time, Terrence felt his carefully constructed world shift slightly off axis. At home, Rosa began to notice changes. Terrence became distracted, often stayed late at work, and when he was home, he seemed absent. "Are you okay?" she asked one morning when Terrence overcooked the eggs for the third time. "Sure, just a lot of work. The new partner needs attention," he replied, avoiding her gaze. Rose frowned. In 17 years of marriage, she had learned to read her husband, and now something about his behavior was troubling her. But she decided not to press the issue, hoping it was just a phase. The turning point came a month after David arrived. They were patrolling the outskirts of town when a heavy rain began to fall. Sheltering in the car, they watched the water drumming on the windshield. "Terrence," David began, his voice sounding determined. "I need to tell you something." Terrence's heart began to beat faster. "I'm listening. I didn't move here just for the job. There were problems in Topeka. Someone found out about my orientation. Rumors started, pressure. I had to leave." Terrence stared straight ahead, unable to turn to David. "I understand. I'm gay, Terrence, and I think you are too." The words hung in the air like thunder on a clear day. Terrence felt his world collapse and rebuild itself at the same time. He could have lied, denied it, kept his secret. But something in David's voice, in his sincerity, broke down all the barriers. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I think you're right. David cautiously reached out and touched his palm. "I don't want to cause you any trouble. I know you have a family, a position in society, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer." Terrence squeezed his hand. That simple touch was both the most natural and the most frightening moment of his life. "What are we doing?" he asked. "I don't know," David replied honestly, "but I know that what we have is real." Their first kiss happened a week later at David's apartment. Terrence told his family that he had to help a new colleague move. Rose even praised him for caring about his colleague. David's apartment was modest but cozy. Several boxes were still unpacked, and photos hung on the walls, family, friends, moments from his past life. "Would you like some coffee?" David asked, clearly nervous. "Yes, thank you." They sat on the sofa discussing trivial matters, but the tension in the air was palpable. Finally, David gathered his courage. "Terrence, He didn't finish his sentence. Terrence leaned toward him, and their lips met. The kiss was gentle, uncertain, but full of long-suppressed feelings. When they broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. "My God," Terrence whispered. "What am I doing?" "What you should have done a long time ago," David replied, hugging him. Terrence didn't come home that night. He told Rose that he and David had stayed late discussing a difficult case, and that he had decided to spend the night on the couch at the station. Rose looked concerned but believed him. The following weeks passed in a haze of secret meetings and stolen moments. Terrence was living a double life, and it was tearing him apart. During the day, he was a model family man and a respected detective, but in the evenings, he secretly met with David. Their relationship developed rapidly. They found every opportunity to be together. Delays after work, responding to calls, patrolling remote areas. Every moment alone was precious. "I've never felt this way before," Terrence confessed one day as he lay in David's arms. "Me neither, but I'm scared, Terrence. What if someone finds out?" Terrence was afraid too. Rumors spread quickly in Prairie View, and homosexuality was taboo. His career, his family, his whole life could be destroyed in an instant. "We'll be careful," he said, but he didn't believe his own words. Meanwhile, Rosa became increasingly suspicious that something was going on. Terrence had become colder and more distant. Their intimacy had virtually ceased, and when she tried to talk about it, he dismissed her, citing stress and fatigue. "Maybe we should talk to a family counselor?" she suggested one day. "No need," Terrence replied sharply. "Everything's fine, just a lot of work." Rose didn't believe him, but she didn't know what to do. She began to pay attention to details. How often her husband mentioned his new partner, how his eyes lit up when he talked about work, how he stayed late. The first problems began 2 months into the relationship. David started complaining of fatigue, headaches, and periodic fever. At first, they blamed it on the stress of adjustment and intense work. "Maybe you should see a doctor," Terrence suggested, when David complained of feeling unwell again. "Come on, it's just the flu. It'll pass," David dismissed. But the symptoms didn't go away. They were joined by night sweats and swollen lymph nodes. David began to look exhausted, although he tried to hide it at work. Their closeness did not go unnoticed in the department. Sheriff Stone noted that they worked well together, but some colleagues began to notice how much time they spent together. "Harris is getting too protective of the new guy," Officer Jenkins muttered to his partner. "He must see him as a son." Terrence and David were careful, but their passion made them reckless. They allowed themselves long glances and accidental touches that could be noticed by attentive eyes. The crisis came unexpectedly. David lost consciousness while on duty. Terrence was nearby and managed to catch him, but the incident happened in front of other officers. "What's wrong with you?" Terrence asked when David came to. "I don't know, I felt dizzy," he replied, but he looked terrible. Sheriff Stone insisted that David see a doctor. "I don't want my people fainting on duty. Go see Dr. Morgan. Let her take a look." Terrence wanted to go with him, but he knew it would arouse suspicion. He stayed at the station, burning with anxiety. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan was an experienced physician who had been working in Prairie View for 15 years. She examined David and frowned. "Young man, when was the last time you had a blood test?" "A long time ago. 2 years ago, I think." "Your symptoms could indicate a variety of problems. We need to run some tests. Would you mind having some blood drawn?" David agreed, albeit reluctantly. Something about the doctor's tone had alarmed him. That evening, they met at David's apartment. Terrence was on edge. "What did the doctor say?" "I need to get some tests done. He said it could be anything from anemia to an infection," David replied, avoiding his eyes. "David, if you're hiding something—" "I'm not hiding anything," he snapped. "I'm just tired of all these symptoms. I want it all to end." Terrence hugged him, feeling his loved one's body tremble. Something told him that their idyll was coming to an end, but he didn't want to believe it. Meanwhile, the situation at home was also heating up. Rose noticed that Terrence had started taking frequent showers after work, buying new clothes, and paying more attention to his appearance. All these little things added up to a disturbing picture. "Terrence, we need to talk," she said one evening after the children had gone to bed. "About what?" he asked without looking up from the newspaper. "About us, about what's going on in our family. You've changed." Terrence looked up. He saw pain and suspicion in his wife's eyes, and it frightened him. "Rose, I don't know what you're talking about." "Then explain to me why you've been staying late at work so often, why you don't touch me anymore, why, when I talk to you, you're somewhere far away." Terrence realized he was standing on the edge of a precipice. He could tell the truth and destroy his family, or continue lying and risk losing both his family and David. "It's just a difficult period at work. A new partner, additional responsibilities." Rose looked at him for a long time. "Fine, but know this. I'm not blind, Terrence. And if you're hiding something, sooner or later, I'll find out." The test results came back a week later. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan read them 3 times, hoping she had made a mistake. But the numbers were relentless and unambiguous. She sighed and dialed David Cole's number. "Officer Cole, you need to come to the clinic immediately, preferably today." "Is it serious?" David asked, although he could tell from the doctor's tone that the news was bad. "We'll talk when I get there." David arrived at the clinic an hour later. Dr. Morgan invited him into her office and locked the door. She was a professional with many years of experience, but conversations like this never came easily to her. "David, I got your test results. I'm afraid the news is not good." David clenched his hands into fists. "Just say it, doctor. You have HIV. The test is positive and the viral load is high. Based on the indicators, the infection occurred relatively recently, possibly a few months ago." The world around David seemed to stop. He heard the doctor's voice as if from a distance through cotton wool. HIV. Those 3 letters crossed out his entire life. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "Unfortunately, yes. But I want to emphasize that HIV is not a death sentence today. With the right treatment, people live full lives. You need to start antiretroviral therapy as soon as possible." David nodded mechanically, but her words did not register in his mind. He thought about Terrence, about their relationship, about what would happen now. "Doctor, could other people have been infected by me?" Elizabeth Morgan looked at him intently. David, I need to know about your sexual contacts over the past few months. All partners must be notified and tested. David turned even paler. There's only one person. He must be tested. HIV can be transmitted asymptomatically. Doctor, this is difficult, very difficult. Elizabeth had seen cases like this before. Secret relationships, fear of exposure, especially in small towns. David, I understand that this is a delicate situation, but people's health is more important than any circumstances. If you can't talk to this person yourself, I can do it anonymously. No, David replied sharply. I'll talk to him myself. Dr. Morgan nodded. All right, but don't delay. Every day of delay could be critical. David left the clinic in a daze. He got into his car and sat there for a long time, staring into space. HIV. How did this happen? He had always been careful. He hadn't had many partners. But the last few months with Terrence, the thought that terrified him most was, what if he had infected Terrence? What if he had ruined not only his own life, but also the life of the man he loved? Terrence was waiting for him at the station, worried about the test results. When David walked in, he knew immediately from the look on his face that something terrible had happened. What did the doctor say? He asked when they were alone. David couldn't bring himself to say the words out loud. He just handed Terrence the test results. Terrence read them and felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. HIV positive. His carefully constructed existence collapsed in a single second. My God, he whispered. David, Terrence, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. Where? How could this happen? David covered his face with his hands. I don't know. Maybe back in Topeka. I had a boyfriend there, Marcus. We broke up badly. He could have been hiding it. Terrence felt panic rising inside him. What about me? Could I be infected? The doctor says you need to get tested right away. Terrence, I'm so sorry. If I had known... Shut up! Terrence snapped. Just shut up and let me think. He walked over to the window, trying to make sense of what had happened. HIV. In Prairie View, it wasn't just a disease, it was a stigma. If it became known, his career would be over, his family would be destroyed, he would become an outcast. What are we going to do? David asked. I don't know, Terrence replied without turning around. Give me some time to think. That evening, Terrence returned home even more distant than usual. Rosa noticed his state immediately. What's wrong? You look terrible. Nothing, just tired. But Rosa didn't believe him. She had known her husband for 17 years and could see that he was in shock. He hardly spoke during dinner, and when Jacob talked about his baseball game at school, Terrence didn't even listen. Dad, are you listening to me? His son asked. What? Yes, of course, great, son. Rose and Jacob exchanged glances. Something was definitely going on. That night, Terrence couldn't sleep. He lay next to his wife, thinking about how their lives might change. If he was infected, how would he explain it to Rose? How would he tell the children? How would he look his colleagues in the eye? The next day, he met David at their usual spot, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town where they sometimes met to be alone. I didn't sleep all night, David said. Terrence, I need to tell you something else. What else? Terrence asked wearily. Dr. Morgan knows I have a partner. She insists that this person take a drug test. Terrence turned pale. You told her about me? No, of course not. But she's not stupid. She knows there's someone else. And what did you say to her? That I'd talk to him myself. Terrence, you really need to get tested. Terrence began pacing back and forth across the warehouse. Do you understand what this means? If I go to Morgan to get tested for HIV, she'll figure it all out. There are no secrets in this town. What if you're infected and don't get treatment? You'll die, Terrence. Maybe that would be better, he replied grimly. David grabbed him by the shoulders. Don't say that. We'll figure something out. We'll find a way. What way? You can leave town, start a new life. But I have a family here, a job my whole life. So I'm just a fling to you? Something to get rid of when it becomes inconvenient? Terrence stopped and looked at David. There was pain in his eyes, but also something else. Resentment that was slowly turning to anger. It's not that simple, David. You don't understand. I understand better than you think. I've been through this before in Topeka. You know why I left there? It wasn't just because of the rumors about my sexuality. There was a married man there who used me and then threw me away when things got hot. I'm not using you. Really? Then what are you doing? You come to me when it's convenient for you, then go back to your perfect family life. And now that there's trouble, you're ready to run away. Terrence felt anger boiling up inside him. You infected me. You ruined my life. Me? Who initiated our relationship? Who couldn't resist the temptation? You seduced me. You did it on purpose. David recoiled as if he had been slapped. Seduced you? Terrence, you came to me. You told me you loved me. I was a fool. I let lust cloud my judgment. Lust? David's voice grew quieter, but there was a steely edge to it. You call what we had lust? Terrence realized he had gone too far, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. What else? You think I'm going to leave my family for you? For a man who brought disease into my life? David was silent for a long minute, staring at Terrence. Then he nodded slowly. I see. So that's how it is. Then let me tell you something, Terrence Harris. You're a coward. You live in fear of your own feelings, of the truth about yourself. And you know what? I'm tired of it. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not going to hide the truth anymore. I'm tired of this charade. Terrence felt a chill in his stomach. David, you can't. Can't what? Tell the truth? Why not? I have a family, children. So what? It hurts me too, Terrence. I'm dying too. But I'm not going to die alone, covering up your lies. David, please, think about what you're doing. I have, all night long. And you know what I came to? That the truth is better than a lie. Always. Terrence realized he was losing control of the situation. David was no longer the submissive lover he used to be. Illness and despair had changed him. What do you want from me? I want you to be honest. With yourself, with me, with your family. I want you to stop playing this pathetic game. And if I'm not ready, David shrugged. Then I'll tell them myself. Rose, Sheriff Stone, the whole town. Let them know who Detective Terrence Harris really is. Terrence felt panic rising inside him. You wouldn't dare. I would. I have nothing left to lose. You have no proof. David smiled bitterly. You think so? What about the letters you wrote me? The photos we took? All the things you left in my apartment? Terrence forgot about the letters. In a fit of passion, he sometimes wrote David notes, declarations of love. If they became public knowledge, David, be reasonable. Think about the consequences. I'm only thinking about them. And you know what? I don't care. If I die, at least I'll die telling the truth. You won't die. There's treatment. That costs a fortune. That requires constant medical supervision. You think there are HIV specialists in this godforsaken place? I'll have to go to Kansas City or Wichita? For what? A cop's salary? Terrence realized that David was right. HIV treatment was expensive and complicated, especially in a small town without specialized clinics. I'll help you. Financially. For my silence? Are you trying to buy me? No, that's not it. We could just find a solution. David shook his head. No, Terrence. The time for compromise is over. Either you tell the truth yourself or I will. How much time do I have? A week. Terrence nodded and headed for the door. At the door, he turned around. David, I really loved you. I know, he replied quietly. But love isn't enough when you're a coward. Terrence left, leaving David alone in the empty warehouse. He got into his car and sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of what had happened. A week. He had a week to find a way out of this situation. Rose was waiting for him at home. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and looked at him intently when he came in. Terrence, we need to talk. Seriously. Now is not the time, Rose. No, now is the time. I know you're hiding something, and I want to know what it is. Terrence looked at his wife, the woman he had lived with for 17 years, the mother of his children. In a week, their world could come crashing down. Perhaps he should prepare her for that. Rose. Yes? He wanted to tell her the truth, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he said nothing, just problems at work. Rose looked at him searchingly. Okay, but know this. I feel like you're hiding something from me, and sooner or later, I'll find out the truth. Terrence nodded and went to the bedroom. Rose was right. The truth always comes out. The only question was how soon and at what cost. 5 days had passed since David's ultimatum. Terrence had hardly slept, barely eaten, and walked around like a zombie. Every night he considered his options: confess to Rose, leave town, find a way to convince David to keep quiet. But all paths led to a dead end. The situation at work became unbearable. David avoided him, answered work questions with one-word answers, and looked at him with such hatred that Terrence's skin crawled. His colleagues began to notice the tension between them. "Harris, what's going on between you and Cole?" Sheriff Stone asked, calling Terrence into his office. "Officer Jenkins says you're barely talking to each other." "Nothing serious, boss. Just a minor professional disagreement." Stone frowned. "Disagreement? A month ago you were working as a team. What changed?" Terrence tried to remain calm. "Cole hasn't been feeling well lately. Maybe he needs some time off?" "He already called in sick for tomorrow. Said he needed to see a doctor in Wichita. Apparently the local treatment isn't working." Terrence's heart skipped a beat. Tomorrow. He had only 1 day left. The situation at home had reached a critical point. Rose could no longer tolerate her husband's strange behavior. In the evening, after the children had gone to bed, she confronted him. "Terrence, I can't take this anymore. You've become a different person. You don't eat, you don't sleep, you avoid conversation. What's going on?" "Rose, please, not now. Now is the time. I'm your wife. We have 2 children. I have a right to know what's going on in our family." Terrence looked at her. The woman who trusted him, loved him, gave him children. Soon, all of that could be over. "Are you seeing another woman?" Rosa asked bluntly. Terrence almost laughed at the irony. "No, Rosa, I don't have another woman." "Then what? Money problems? Illness? Problems at work?" "It's complicated." Rosa sat down next to him and took his hand. "Terrence, we've been together for 17 years. We've been through a lot. Whatever happens, we'll get through it together." Her words were like a knife in his heart. If she only knew the truth. Terrence pulled his hand away. "Some problems can't be solved together." "What do you mean?" "It means that sometimes a person goes so far that there's no turning back." Rosa was frightened by the tone of his voice. "Terrence, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" But Terrence had already stood up and walked to the door. "I need to go out. Take a walk." "Now, it's almost 11 o'clock. "I need to think." Rose watched him go, her eyes full of worry. Something terrible was happening to her family, but she didn't know how to stop it. Terrence got into his car and drove to David's house. He had to try again. Convince him. Find a compromise, anything. David opened the door in his bathrobe, looking even worse than he had a week ago. The disease was clearly progressing. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. "I need to talk to you." "The time for talking is over. You have 1 day left. David, please, hear me out." David reluctantly let him into the apartment. Terrence looked around. Medicine was scattered everywhere. Medical reports and referrals to specialists were lying on the table. "How are you feeling?" "Disgusting. Tomorrow I'm going to Wichita to see a specialist. I need to start therapy immediately, otherwise—" He didn't finish his sentence. "David, I understand that you're angry. I understand that you're hurting. But think about the consequences. If you tell everyone about us, it will destroy not only my life, but also the lives of my children." "My life is already ruined," David replied, "because of you." "Not because of me! You said yourself that you could have been infected in Topeka." "I could have been, but I know for sure that I infected you. And instead of supporting me, you're blaming me for everything." Terrence sat down on the sofa and covered his face with his hands. "David, I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I'm scared." "And I'm not scared. Do you think it's easy for me to live with the thought that I'm dying? That my career is over? That I'll never have a normal family? You have a chance to start a new life. You're young, you can move away, find a job in another city where no one knows you. And you want me to disappear? To free you from your problems? I want us both to find a way out of this situation." David stood up and began pacing the room. "You know what pisses me off the most? It's not that I'm sick. It's not that my life is ruined. It's that you turned out to be a coward. I thought you were different." "David, No, let me finish. I thought we had something real. I thought you were capable of bold actions, of sacrifice. But it turns out you're just a married man who was having fun on the side. That's not true. It's true. And you know what? I don't even need your confession. Tomorrow I'll tell Sheriff Stone everything myself. And the day after tomorrow I'll tell the whole town. Terrence jumped up. David, stop! Think about what you're doing. I'm telling the truth. That's what I'm doing. But why? What's the point of destroying my family? David stopped and looked at him with contempt. What was the point of destroying my life? You used me, Terrence. You took what you wanted and now you're throwing me away like trash. I loved you. You're lying. You only loved yourself. Your status, your reputation, your perfect life. Terrence felt something break inside him. Months of pent-up emotions, fear and despair poured out. Yes, I'm selfish. Yes, I'm a coward. But what do you want from me? For me to abandon my family, my children, my job? For what? For you? For a sick man with no future? David turned pale. A sick man with no future? Yes, you're dying, David, and you want to drag me down with you. You bastard, David whispered. You bastard. Maybe, but I'm not going to ruin my children's lives because of your revenge. Revenge? You think this is revenge? What else? You want me to suffer like you do. David walked over to the table and picked up the folder with the documents. See this? Test results, medical reports, doctor's referrals. Do you know how much this costs? Thousands of dollars a month. I don't have that kind of money. I said I'd help. For keeping quiet? No thanks. You know what I've decided? Tomorrow I'm telling Sheriff Stone everything, and then I'm suing the department. Workplace contamination, concealment of important information, discrimination. I'll get enough money for treatment. Terrence felt a chill in his stomach. You can't do that. I can and I will. I have proof of our relationship. Letters, photographs, statements from people who saw us together. What statements? Mrs. Patterson, for example. She saw you come to my place several times late at night. The waitress at the Roadhouse where we had dinner that night after the McGregor call. You think no one noticed? Terrence realized he was trapped. David had thought it all out. He had been preparing for this. David, don't do this. I'm begging you. It's too late to beg. The decision has been made. What if I refuse to pay? What if I say you're lying? David smiled coldly. Then everyone will find out the truth for free. Either way, your life is over. Terrence felt rage wash over him. The man he loved wanted to destroy him. Everything he had lived for, worked for, built, everything would be destroyed. You son of a bitch, he hissed. Maybe. But tomorrow you'll find out what it's like to be exposed. Terrence looked around, his gaze falling on a heavy glass vase on the table. A crazy thought flashed through his mind. If David were gone, the problem would disappear. Terrence, what are you thinking about? David noticed the change in his expression. About the fact that you're leaving me no choice. What choice? Terrence slowly stood up. Do you want to ruin my life? Do you want my children to find out what their father is? Gay? Yes, I do. Let them know the truth. No, Terrence said quietly. That won't happen. He took a step toward the table. David understood his intentions and tried to back away, but it was too late. Terrence grabbed a vase and hit him over the head. David fell, blood flowing from the wound. He tried to get up, but Terrence struck him again and again. You wanted to destroy my family, Terrence muttered, striking blow after blow. You wanted to take my children's father away from them. You wanted to turn me into an outcast. David didn't move anymore. Blood spread across the floor, his eyes staring into nothingness. Terrence stood over the body, breathing heavily. The vase fell from his hands and shattered. The apartment was deathly silent. Gradually, it dawned on him what he had done. He had killed David. He had killed the man he loved. Panic gripped him. What should he do now? How could he explain David's disappearance? How could he hide the murder? Terrence forced himself to think logically. He was a police officer. He knew how investigations were conducted. He had to get rid of all the evidence and establish an alibi. First, he gathered everything that could indicate their relationship. Letters, photographs, gifts. He burned them in the sink. Then he carefully wiped fingerprints from all surfaces. The body had to be hidden. Terrence wrapped it in a blanket and dragged it to his car. It was fortunate that David's apartment was on the first floor with a separate entrance. He drove the body to an old quarry 20 miles outside the city. The place was deserted. No one ever went there. He drowned the body in deep water, tying heavy stones to it. He drove David's car back to the house and left it near the entrance. Let them think he left on foot. Terrence returned home in the early morning. Rose was still asleep. He took a shower, changed his clothes, and lay down next to his wife, pretending to be asleep. In the morning, the phone rang. It was Sheriff Stone. "Terrence, we have a problem. David Cole didn't show up for work. He's not answering his phone. Go check on him and see what happened." "Sure, boss. I'll be right there." Terrence got dressed, kissed his wife goodbye, and drove to David's house. On the way, he rehearsed his response to his partner's disappearance. A small crowd had already gathered outside the house. Mrs. Patterson was worried that her tenant wasn't answering his phone. "Officer Harris, thank God you're here. David hasn't left his apartment since last night. I knocked, but he didn't answer." Terrence feigned concern. "Maybe he's not feeling well. Let's check on him." They went up to the apartment. Terrence knocked, called out to David, then reluctantly broke the lock. The apartment was empty. He had cleaned up the blood and thrown away the broken pieces of the vase. Everything looked normal, except for a suspicious stain on the carpet that could have been anything. "Strange," said Terrence, looking around the rooms. "His things are here, but he's not." Mrs. Patterson threw up her hands. "Where could he have gone? His car is in the driveway." "Maybe he walked to the doctor's or to a friend's." "What friends? He didn't know anyone here except you." Terrence pretended to look around the apartment carefully. "We need to notify the sheriff. Something might have happened to him." An hour later, Sheriff Stone arrived at the house with 2 other officers. The official investigation into David Cole's disappearance began. "When did you last see him?" Stone asked Terrence. "Yesterday at work. He said he wasn't feeling well and was going to see a doctor in Wichita." "But he never made it to Wichita. I already called the clinic. He didn't show up for his appointment." Stone looked around the apartment and questioned the neighbors. No one had seen or heard anything suspicious. "Maybe he decided to leave town," one of the officers suggested. "Without his things? Without his car?" Stone shook his head. "Something's not right here." Terrence tried to look concerned but not suspicious. "Boss, David had been acting strange lately. He was sick and nervous. Maybe he had some personal problems?" "What kind of problems?" "I don't know. He didn't talk about it, but you could tell something was bothering him." Stone nodded. "Let's start an official search. Check the hospitals, bus stations, talk to his friends in Topeka. Maybe he went back there." The investigation began. Terrence participated in it, pretending to be a concerned colleague. He helped interview witnesses, check leads, and search for the missing man. Every day he thought about what lay at the bottom of a quarry 20 miles from the city, about the man he loved and killed, about the fact that now he would have to live with this secret for the rest of his life. Rose noticed that after his partner disappeared, Terrence had become a little calmer, not as nervous and distant. "You must be worried about your colleague," she said. "Yes," Terrence replied. "I'm very worried." And it was true. He was worried, but not in the way his wife thought. 3 weeks had passed since David Cole's disappearance. The investigation had reached a dead end. They had checked all the hospitals within a 100-mile radius, contacted relatives in other states, and reviewed bus station surveillance footage. No leads. Terrence came to work every morning and pretended to be concerned. He offered new theories, participated in the search, and even organized a group of volunteers to comb the area. The irony of the situation did not escape him. He was looking for a body whose location he knew better than anyone else. "Maybe he decided to disappear voluntarily after all," Officer Jenkins suggested during another meeting. "People sometimes do that. They get tired of life and just leave." Sheriff Stone shook his head. "Without money? Without ID? His wallet and driver's license were left in his apartment, and there's only $300 in his bank account. Maybe he had debts? Problems with the law that we didn't know about?" another officer added. Terrence cautiously joined the discussion. I worked with him for a month. I didn't notice anything suspicious. True, he seemed upset lately. What was he upset about? Asked Stone. I'm not sure. Maybe his health. He complained of feeling unwell and was planning to see a doctor. Stone made a note in his notebook. We need to contact his doctor in Topeka to find out about his health. Terrence tensed. If they started digging into David's medical history, they might find out about his HIV, and that would lead to uncomfortable questions about his personal life. Fortunately, the doctor in Topeka was bound by medical confidentiality and refused to provide any information without an official request. For now, the investigation was at a standstill. At home, things gradually returned to normal. Rose stopped asking awkward questions, deciding that her husband's strange behavior was due to stress at work. Terrence tried to be an attentive father and husband, trying to make up for his guilt. How's the search for your partner going? Rose asked over dinner. No leads yet. It's as if he's vanished into thin air. That's strange. People don't just disappear like that. Terrence nodded, continuing to eat. If only she knew how easy it was for a person to disappear if you knew what you were doing. The first serious problem arose in the 4th week. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan came to the station with questions about David. Sheriff Stone, I need to talk to you about David Cole, she said as she entered his office. Of course, doctor. Do you have any information about him? Elizabeth hesitated. This is a sensitive matter. David was my patient. We discussed serious medical issues. What kind of issues? I'm afraid I can't disclose any details without special permission, but I will say this. He had reason to be concerned about his health, and he mentioned the need to inform someone close to him. Stone frowned. A close person? Did he have a girlfriend? Not a girlfriend, he said partner. I assumed it was a man. The office fell silent. Stone slowly put down his pen. Doctor, are you saying that David Cole was gay? Possibly. He didn't say so directly, but he hinted at it, and he mentioned that this partner worked for the police. Terrence, who was in the next office, heard the conversation through the thin wall. His blood ran cold. Dr. Morgan remembered more than he thought she did. Stone called all the staff to an emergency meeting. We have new information on the Cole case, he announced. He may have had a close relationship with one of our people. The officers looked at each other. Terrence tried to look surprised. Boss, are you serious? Jenkins asked. Was Cole gay? Possibly. And if so, his disappearance may be related to that relationship. But which one of us? Another officer began, then fell silent, realizing the absurdity of the question. Stone glanced around at his subordinates. I'm not accusing anyone. I just want anyone who knows anything to come forward. It might help us find David. Terrence felt his palms sweat. Boss, where did you get this information? From Dr. Morgan. David had an appointment with her before he disappeared. What else did she say? Stone looked at him intently. What do you think she might have said? I don't know. I'm just curious if there are any other leads. That's all for now. But I plan to conduct more detailed interviews with each of you. Maybe someone noticed something but didn't think it was important. After the meeting, Terrence realized that the noose was tightening. Sooner or later, the investigation would catch up with him. He had to do something. That evening, he met Dr. Morgan again. He approached her at her car after work. Doctor, can we talk? Elizabeth looked back. Detective Harris? About what? About David Cole. I was his partner, and I'm very upset. I understand. It's a difficult situation. Terrence cautiously tested the waters. I heard you have information about his personal life? Elizabeth looked at him intently. Why are you interested in that? I just want to understand what happened to him. Maybe this information will help. Detective, tell me honestly, did you know about David's sexual orientation? Terrence hesitated for a second. I suspected it, but we didn't discuss personal matters. What about his relationships with anyone in the department? No. I mean, he wasn't openly dating anyone. Elizabeth nodded. I see. Detective, if you know anything, it's best to tell me now. Secrets have a way of coming out at the worst possible moment. I don't know anything, Terrence replied firmly. But Dr. Morgan didn't believe him. She looked at him suspiciously. The next day, something happened that changed the course of the investigation. A group of fishermen found remains in a quarry. Not David's. The body had been in the water too long to be identified, but it prompted the police to search the surrounding waterways more thoroughly. "Organize a search of all the lakes and quarries," Stone ordered. "If David drowned, we'll find him." Terrence realized that time was against him. David's body was lying in a quarry 20 miles from the city. Sooner or later, it would be found. He made a desperate decision. That night, he drove to the quarry to move the body. But when he got there, he realized it was too late. Rescue vehicles were on the shore, and someone had already searched the water. Fortunately, the body had not yet been found. It was lying in the deepest part of the quarry, tied to rocks. But the search continued. Terrence returned home in a panic. His plan was falling apart. Soon, everything would be revealed. In the morning, the phone rang. It was Sheriff Stone. "Terrence, come to the old quarry on Mill Road immediately. We found something." Terrence's heart almost stopped. "What exactly?" "Come and see." Terrence arrived at the quarry and saw a crowd of people on the shore. Divers were pulling something dark from the bottom. "What is it?" he asked Stone. "A body. A man about 30 years old. He's been in the water for several weeks." Terrence forced himself to move closer. The body was almost unrecognizable, but the clothes... "Could it be David?" Stone asked. Terrence looked closely at the remains. "Possibly. The height is similar, and David had a jacket like that. We need an expert opinion. Let's send it to Wichita for identification." The next few days were agonizing. Terrence waited for the results of the examination, knowing that his fate was being decided in a laboratory in Wichita. The results came back a week later. DNA confirmed that the body was that of David Cole. Death was caused by traumatic brain injury sustained from multiple blows to the head with a blunt object. "This is murder," Stone announced at the meeting. Someone killed David and dumped his body in a quarry. Terrence felt his world crumbling. Now it was an official murder investigation. "Do we have any suspects?" Jenkins asked. "Not yet. But David may have had personal problems we didn't know about. We need to dig deeper." Stone looked at Terrence. "You worked with him the most. Maybe you can remember something else?" "I've already told you everything," Terrence replied, trying to control his voice. "Think again. Any little thing could be important." That same day, Rosa came to Terrence's house for a serious talk. She waited until the children were in bed, then sat down across from her husband. "Terrence, I need to tell you something." "What?" Elizabeth Morgan called today. "She wanted to talk to me about you." Terrence froze. "What exactly?" She asked if I had noticed any changes in your behavior over the past few months. Any strange phone calls? Late nights at work? "And what did you tell her?" "The truth. That you really have changed. You're nervous, distant." Rose paused. "Terrence, what's going on? Why is the doctor interested in you in connection with David's murder?" Terrence realized he couldn't lie anymore. Too many people were asking questions. "Rose, there are things you don't know about me." "What things?" He was silent for a long time, gathering his strength. "I had a relationship with David." Rose looked at him, not understanding. "What kind of relationship?" "A romantic relationship." The silence in the room was deafening. Rosa slowly realized the meaning of his words. "You're saying you had an affair? With a man?" "Yes." "My God." Rosa covered her face with her hands. "How long?" 2 months. It started shortly after he arrived." "And you killed him?" Terrence raised his head sharply. "No, of course not." "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because soon everyone will know. Dr. Morgan knows about our relationship. Sooner or later, it will become public knowledge." Rose stood up and walked over to the window. 17 years of marriage? 2 children? And you're telling me you're gay? I don't know who I am. I'm confused, Rose. It was stronger than me. What about me? What about the children? Don't we mean anything to you? We do. We mean everything. That's why I tried to hide it. Rose turned to him with rage in her eyes. Hide it? You used us as a cover for your escapades. That's not true. That's exactly what it is. And now that your lover is dead, you've decided to come clean? Terrence realized he had made a mistake in telling the truth, but it was too late to back down. Rose, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. You didn't? When you were sleeping with him, did you think about your family? The harsh words coming out of Rose's mouth felt like a slap in the face. She never swore. "I want you to leave the house," she said quietly. "Rose." "Today. I don't want the children to see you until I decide what to tell them." Terrence nodded. He understood her reaction. In this situation, he was entirely to blame. He gathered his belongings and drove to a motel on the outskirts of town. Sitting in a shabby room, he thought about how quickly his life had fallen apart. His family was destroyed, his reputation would soon be ruined, and the murder investigation was closing in on him. The next morning, he was arrested. Sheriff Stone personally came to the motel with an arrest warrant. "Terrence Harris, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of David Cole." "On what grounds?" "We have witnesses who saw you at David's apartment on the night he disappeared. There is also testimony about your intimate relationship." Terrence did not resist. He knew this moment would come. At the station, he was placed in a holding cell. The irony of the situation was that he had been arrested by people he had worked with for years. The trial was set for a month later. During that time, the whole story became public knowledge. The newspapers wrote about the scandal in the police department, about secret homosexual relationships, about a murder motivated by jealousy. Rose filed for divorce. The children stayed with her, and Terrence never saw them again. At the trial, the prosecutor presented compelling evidence, witness testimony, DNA analysis, and a motive for the murder. Terrence's lawyer tried to prove his innocence, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Terrence was sentenced to 25 years in prison. At 42, his life was effectively over. Prairie View discussed the scandal at length. Then new events and new rumors emerged, and the story of the detective murderer was gradually forgotten.